Ethan Kane's seemingly perfect life unravels when he discovers his wife, Lila, is having an affair with his best friend. Logan, betrayed and humiliated, Ethan sets out on a calculated path of revenge, exposing lies, financial corruption, and hidden agendas. As tensions rise and secrets unravel, Ethan's obsession with justice pushes him to dangerous extremes, leaving viewers questioning loyalty, trust, and the true cost of betrayal. With shocking twists and explosive confrontations, this story dives deep into infidelity, manipulation, and revenge, ensuring emotions run high and tempers flare. It was a crisp autumn evening in New York City. The skyline shimmered through the penthouse windows of the Kane residence, but inside, the air was anything but calm. Ethan Kane adjusted his cufflinks, the reflection of his sharp navy suit staring back at him in the floor-to-ceiling glass. He was the picture of success, CEO of Kane Tech, one of the fastest-growing software firms on the East Coast on paper. His life was perfect. A multi-million-dollar company, a luxury apartment, and a beautiful wife, Lila Kane, who could turn heads in any room she entered. But tonight, something felt off. The dining table was set with precision. Crystal glasses, silk napkins, and a centerpiece of white roses. Their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan had made the reservation for one of the most exclusive restaurants in Manhattan, but at the last minute, he canceled. He wanted privacy tonight. Lila swept into the room like a gust of wind. Her emerald green dress hugged her figure, and her diamond earrings sparkled under the chandelier. She looked breathtaking, almost too perfect. "You're home early," she said, her voice smooth but tight. Ethan offered a practiced smile. "Thought we could celebrate here more intimate?" Lila's red lips curled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Intimate," she repeated, picking up her glass of wine. "Right." Ethan noticed the way her fingers tapped nervously against the stem of the glass. A habit he hadn't seen in years. It reminded him of their early days, when she'd been an ambitious paralegal working late hours, and he'd been a startup dreamer who barely slept. But things had changed. He sat across from her, watching the candlelight flicker between them. "Lila, are you happy?" Her eyes darted up, caught off guard. "What kind of question is that?" "A real one." She took a sip, her gaze shifting to the view outside. "Of course I'm happy. Why wouldn't I be?" He leaned back, studying her. "I don't know, you tell me." Lila opened her mouth to respond, but the buzz of her phone interrupted. She silenced it quickly, tucking it into her clutch. "Work?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "It's nothing," she replied, a little too fast. But Ethan wasn't the kind of man who missed details. He'd built an empire by noticing what others overlooked, and lately, he'd been noticing a lot. The late nights, the sudden weekend meetings, the scent of cologne that wasn't his lingering on her coat. He knew something was wrong, and he wasn't alone. Hours earlier, Ethan had met with Marcus, his private investigator. In a dimly lit bar downtown, Marcus slid a folder across the table. "You were right," Marcus said, his voice low. "She's been meeting him for months." Ethan's hands tightened around the folder before opening it. Inside were photos. Lila at a hotel, arm in arm with someone who looked too comfortable, too familiar. Logan Pierce. Ethan's jaw clenched as he flipped through the images. Logan had been Ethan's friend since college, best man at their wedding, the kind of guy who charmed everyone with his easy laugh and expensive suits. And now he was the man sleeping with Ethan's wife. Marcus cleared his throat. "What do you want to do?" Ethan shut the folder. "Let her think I don't know." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" Ethan's eyes darkened. "I'm sure." Because Ethan Kane wasn't just planning to confront them, he was planning something much bigger. Back in the penthouse, Lila excused herself to the bedroom, claiming she needed to freshen up. Ethan watched her go, his mind racing. He poured himself another glass of whiskey and walked to his office. The walls were lined with awards and framed magazine covers featuring his face, proof of the life he'd built. But on his desk sat something more important, a USB drive. It contained months of databank transfers, emails, text messages, everything he needed to bring down both Lila and Logan. But this wasn't just about revenge. It was about control. Lila stood in front of the mirror, fixing her makeup, but her hands trembled. She wasn't sure if it was guilt or fear. She'd planned to tell Ethan tonight. She had to. Logan said it was time to stop pretending, stop sneaking around. They were in love after all. At least, that's what Logan kept saying. But staring at her reflection, she felt a wave of doubt. Ethan wasn't a man to cross lightly. She'd seen how ruthless he could be in business. What if he... Her phone buzzed again. Logan, you okay? Don't back out now. She swallowed hard and texted back. Lila, I won't. But as she tucked her phone away, she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight wasn't going to end the way either of them expected. Ethan returned to the dining room as Lila reappeared, her smile back in place. Ready for dessert? She asked, her tone light. Actually, Ethan said, pulling out her chair, I thought we could open some champagne first. He walked to the bar and poured 2 glasses, his movements smooth and deliberate. Lila accepted hers, but as she took a sip, Ethan's voice cut through the air. To 10 years, he said, raising his glass. Lila hesitated, then clinked her glass against his. To 10 years. But Ethan didn't drink. Instead, he set his glass down and leaned in closer. And to the truth, he added, his voice low. Lila froze. What? What do you mean? Ethan pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Within seconds, a video began playing. It was footage of Lila and Logan, kissing in a hotel lobby, laughing over drinks, walking into a suite together. Lila's glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble floor. What the hell is this? She whispered, her face draining of color. You tell me, Ethan said, his voice eerily calm. Lila's breath hitched. I can explain. Save it. Ethan's eyes bored into hers. You made your choice. Now it's my turn. And as he walked toward his office, leaving her trembling in the dining room, one thing was clear. This was just the beginning. Ethan stood in his office, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, scrolling through the files Marcus had gathered, emails between Lila and Logan, restaurant reservations, hotel receipts. It was all there, cold, hard proof of their betrayal. But Ethan wasn't just looking at evidence. He was planning his next move. The text notification on his phone pulled him back into the moment. Marcus, everything's in place, ready when you are. Ethan's lips curved into a slight smile. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they've already decided how the story ends. He pocketed his phone and headed back to the dining room. Lila was still there, pacing nervously, the broken wine glass now swept aside. You're scaring me, Ethan, she said as soon as he entered. He tilted his head, feigning curiosity. Am I? I thought you weren't afraid of anything. Stop it, she snapped. Whatever this is, this game, you don't get to control me like this. Ethan's eyes darkened. Control you? He let out a short laugh. You mean like how you controlled me? Lied to me, slept with my best friend? Lila's breath hitched, but she quickly regained her composure. You weren't here for me, Ethan, ever. I was alone in this marriage long before Logan came along. Ethan's jaw tightened. Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? She stepped closer, her voice trembling. I didn't want it to happen this way. But it did, he shot back, and now we both have to live with that. Lila opened her mouth to respond, but her phone buzzed again. Ethan's eyes dropped to it, and for the first time, Lila panicked. She grabbed it off the table, but Ethan was faster. He snatched it from her hands and glanced at the screen. Logan. Did you tell him yet? Call me as soon as you can. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone before tossing it back onto the table. Looks like your boyfriend's getting impatient, he said coldly. Tears welled up in Lila's eyes. Please, Ethan, don't do this. We can fix this. But Ethan was already walking away. Later that night, Lila found herself sitting in the master bedroom, staring at her reflection in the vanity mirror. Her makeup was smudged, her hair no longer perfectly styled. The truth was out now, and as much as she wanted to believe they could fix this, a sinking feeling told her that Ethan wasn't done yet. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Logan. Logan, I'll handle him. Don't worry. She wanted to believe him, but deep down, she knew Ethan wouldn't go down without a fight. Meanwhile, Ethan was meeting Marcus at an underground parking garage, the tension between them as thick as the fumes in the air. You sure you're ready for this? Marcus asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. I've never been more ready. Marcus handed him a second folder, this one thicker than the first. Logan's not as clean as he pretends to be, Marcus said. Tax fraud, money laundering. You name it. Ethan's eyes scanned the documents, and for the first time, he felt a flicker of satisfaction. Perfect, he said. Marcus hesitated. And Lila? Ethan's face hardened. She made her choice. By morning, the story had already started unraveling. Logan arrived at his law office only to be greeted by investigators seizing files and computers. His assistant stood frozen, unsure of what to do. What's going on? Logan demanded, pushing past the officers. One of them turned. Logan Pierce? Yes. You're under investigation for financial crimes. We'll need you to come with us. Logan's heart pounded as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. This is a mistake. But even as he said it, he knew the truth. Someone had set him up, and there was only one person who could have pulled it off. Ethan. Back at the penthouse, Lila was scrolling through the news when her phone rang. Logan? She answered quickly, but it wasn't Logan. Mrs. Kane? A stern voice said. This is Detective Harris from the Financial Crimes Unit. We need to ask you a few questions about your connection to Logan Pierce. Lila's heart stopped. Connection. What do you mean? Let's start with the joint accounts and move from there. The line went dead, leaving Lila clutching the phone in disbelief. She turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway, calm and collected. What did you do? She demanded. Ethan leaned against the frame, arms crossed. I did what you and Logan never thought I could. I outplayed you. Lila shook her head, tears spilling down her face. You can't do this. You'll destroy him. That's the point, Ethan said simply. Why? She whispered. What does this fix? Nothing, he admitted, but it feels damn good. And just like that, the walls around her life began to crumble. Lila spent the next few days in a haze, watching as her world fell apart. The investigation into Logan widened, dragging her name into the headlines. Friends stopped calling, work became unbearable. And Ethan. He carried on as if nothing had changed, but things had changed, for both of them. Ethan started spending more time at work, diving into projects and avoiding the penthouse. At first, it felt like victory. But as the days stretched on, he couldn't shake the emptiness gnawing at him. He'd won the battle. But at what cost? By the end of the week, Logan had been arrested and denied bail. Lila had moved out of the penthouse, taking only what she could carry. Ethan sat in his office, staring at the empty space where her things used to be. Marcus entered, breaking the silence. It's done. Logan's facing charges that'll stick. And Lila. Ethan looked up. What about her? She's staying at a hotel alone. Ethan's chest tightened, but he shook it off. Good. But even as he said it, he couldn't help but wonder if this was really the ending he wanted. And that's where we'll pause for now. If you're as hooked on this story as I am, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, things are just getting started, and you won't want to miss it. Ethan stood at the edge of his penthouse balcony, the city lights sprawling beneath him. The weight of his choices pressed down, but he wasn't second-guessing. Not yet. The plan was moving faster than he'd expected, and the cracks in Lila's carefully constructed world were already spreading. Still, something gnawed at him. Was this satisfaction or regret? His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. Marcus. Logan's officially charged, bail denied. Ethan's grip tightened around the phone. Logan was exactly where he belonged, cornered, powerless, and falling apart. But despite the victory, Ethan couldn't shake the hollow feeling that had crept in since Lila left. He poured himself another drink and sat down, staring at the divorce papers she'd left behind untouched, unfiled. Was this what he wanted? Meanwhile, Lila sat on the edge of a stiff hotel bed, scrolling through news updates. The headlines were brutal. Top attorney arrested in shocking fraud scheme. Logan Pierce faces decades behind bars. The articles barely mentioned her name, but the comments section wasn't so forgiving. People called her a gold digger, a cheater, and worse. Her phone buzzed again. Logan's attorney. "He's asking for you," the man said, his voice tight. Lila's stomach twisted. She hadn't visited Logan since his arrest, and part of her didn't want to, but guilt was a relentless weight, pulling her under. "I'll be there," she whispered, before hanging up. The next morning, Ethan watched from the shadows as Lila entered the courthouse. Her head was down, her steps hurried. Marcus joined him in the corner of the parking garage. "She's visiting him," he said. Ethan's jaw tensed. "Good. Good?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Within seconds, surveillance footage from Logan's holding area lit up. "Let's find out what she really wants," Ethan muttered. Lila sat across from Logan in the sterile visiting room. He looked rough, his usual polished appearance replaced with unshaven stubble and hollow eyes. "They froze my accounts," he said immediately. "I have nothing left." "I know," Lila replied softly. He leaned forward. "We can fix this once I'm out. We'll rebuild together." Lila hesitated. "What if you don't get out?" Logan's face hardened. "I will, but I need your help." She swallowed. "How?" "I need money. For a new lawyer. Someone who can fight this." Her stomach dropped. She didn't have that kind of money. Ethan had made sure of that. "Lila, please," Logan pressed. "We can't let him win." But even as Logan spoke, Lila couldn't help but wonder, hadn't Ethan already won? Later that night, Ethan reviewed the footage. He'd expected desperation from Logan, but what caught him off guard was Lila's hesitation. She wasn't fighting for Logan the way he'd expected. Marcus leaned over. "You still think she's loyal to him?" Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he rewound the footage, studying her expression. There was something else there, something he hadn't accounted for. Doubt. Days passed, and the cracks in Logan's defense deepened. Witnesses turned against him. Business partners distanced themselves. Ethan's plan was working perfectly. But Lila? She stopped visiting Logan, stopped taking his calls. Instead, she focused on finding a job and avoiding the mess she'd created. One afternoon, she showed up at Ethan's office, unannounced. His assistant buzzed him. "Your wife, ex-wife, is here." Ethan's chest tightened. "Send her in." Lila stepped inside, looking nothing like the woman who had once dominated every room. Her hair was pulled back into a loose bun, and her eyes were tired. "What do you want?" Ethan asked, leaning back in his chair. "I need help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He raised an eyebrow. "Help from me?" She nodded. "Not for Logan. For me." Ethan's curiosity flared, but he kept his expression neutral. "Why should I help you?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "Because I made a mistake, and I don't know how to fix it." For the first time, Ethan saw something real. Fear, regret, maybe even shame. But was it too late? By the time Lila left his office, Ethan's mind was racing. Marcus, who had been listening in from the next room, stepped inside. "What do you think?" Marcus asked. "I think she's telling the truth," Ethan admitted. "And what are you going to do about it?" Ethan stared at the empty chair where Lila had been sitting, his emotions warring with his logic. "I don't know," he said finally. That night, Ethan found himself staring at the divorce papers again. He could sign them and be done with it, walk away and never look back. But something held him back. Instead, he picked up his phone and called Marcus. "I want to know everything she's been doing since she left." Marcus hesitated. "You sure?" "Find out." Because if Ethan was going to make a decision, he needed the full picture. The next day, Marcus delivered his report. "Lila's been applying for jobs, low-level stuff, retail, admin work. She's not seeing anyone, and she's living in a tiny studio downtown." Ethan flipped through the photos and bank statements. She wasn't lying. Marcus cleared his throat. One more thing, she donated what little money she had left to Logan's victims. Anonymous payments through a third party. Ethan froze. What? She's trying to make things right, Marcus said. Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he stared at the evidence, trying to make sense of it. Was this guilt or redemption? Lila, meanwhile, was struggling to keep her head above water. The whispers followed her everywhere. The woman who ruined her marriage and threw her life away. She barely slept, barely ate, and most days, she wondered if she'd ever feel normal again. But through it all, she kept moving. When she landed a job at a local nonprofit helping domestic abuse survivors, it felt like a small victory, and for the first time in months, she let herself hope. Ethan found himself outside her new workplace one evening, watching as she walked out. She didn't notice him at first, but when she did, she froze. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I wanted to see for myself," he said. "See what?" "If you'd really changed." Lila's eyes softened, but she didn't move closer. "And what do you think?" Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he handed her an envelope. "What's this?" "Your divorce papers," he said. "Signed." Lila's breath caught. "But," Ethan added, "that doesn't mean this is over." She looked up at him, confused. "It just means we're starting over," he said. And for the first time in months, she smiled. "But if you think this is the end of the story, think again. The final showdown is coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss it." Ethan stared at the divorce papers in Lila's trembling hands. Her fingers brushed against the edge of the envelope, but she didn't open it. Instead, she looked up at him, her eyes searching for answers he wasn't ready to give. "Starting over?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "What does that even mean?" Ethan stepped closer, but not too close. "It means I'm giving you a chance, but don't mistake it for forgiveness." Lila swallowed hard. "And what about Logan? What happens to him?" Ethan's expression hardened. "He'll get exactly what he deserves." "But you already destroyed him." Ethan's eyes flashed. "Not yet." Lila flinched, but she didn't back down. "Then what's the point of this?" "To see if you deserve something better," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Because right now, I'm not sure you do." Lila's eyes burned with tears, but she held her ground. "And what about you, Ethan? Do you deserve something better?" The question hung between them, heavy and unanswerable. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He paced his penthouse, haunted by the ghosts of everything he'd lost, and everything he wasn't sure he could get back. He poured himself another drink and called Marcus. "Tell me we've got something," Ethan said. Marcus's voice was grim. Logan's been reaching out to his old contacts. Looks like he's trying to shift the blame, pin the fraud on one of his associates." Ethan smirked. "Typical." "That's not all," Marcus added. "He's also been trying to dig up dirt on you." Ethan's grip on the glass tightened. "On me?" "Yeah. He's desperate, Ethan. He knows you set him up, and he's trying to take you down with him." Ethan's blood ran cold. Logan wasn't finished. Not yet. "Keep watching him," Ethan said. "If he makes a move, I want to know about it." The next morning, Lila showed up at Logan's hearing. She'd told herself she wasn't going to go, but something pulled her there anyway. Logan's lawyer argued for a plea deal, reduced time in exchange for cooperation, but the prosecution wasn't budging. Lila sat in the back of the courtroom, her heart pounding as Logan's eyes found hers. He looked desperate, and for the first time she didn't feel sorry for him. When the judge denied bail again, Logan's shoulders slumped, and Lila felt a strange sense of relief. She stood up to leave, but as she walked past the rows of reporters, a voice stopped her. "Lila!" It was Logan. He stood at the defendant's table, his voice raw with anger. "This is your fault!" he shouted. "You did this to me!" The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at her. Lila froze, but she didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just walked out the door, leaving Logan to drown in his own mess. Ethan was waiting outside the courthouse. "Bold move showing up here," he said as she approached. "I had to," Lila replied. "I needed to see it for myself." And I'm done." Ethan raised an eyebrow. Are you? Lila's voice didn't waver. Yes, I can't fix him. I don't want to. For the first time, Ethan saw something in her that he hadn't seen in months. Clarity. Good, he said, because it's not over yet. That night, Logan made his move. Marcus called Ethan just after midnight. He's trying to frame you, Marcus said. He's leaking documents, falsified records tying you to his crimes. Ethan's chest tightened. How bad is it? Bad enough that the press is already picking it up. Ethan swore under his breath. Shut it down. I'm on it, Marcus said. But Ethan, this isn't just about the documents. Logan's desperate. He might do something worse. Let him try, Ethan said, his voice cold. But even as he said it, a part of him knew this wasn't going to end without blood. The next morning, Ethan arrived at his office to find reporters camped outside. Cameras flashed as he stepped out of his car, but he ignored them. Inside, Marcus was already waiting. We traced the leaks, Marcus said, handing Ethan a file. Logan's using a reporter at the Ledger. She's pushing his story hard. Ethan skimmed through the documents, his jaw tightening. And the good news? Ethan asked. Marcus smirked. We have something better. He handed Ethan a second folder. What is it? Ethan asked. Proof that Logan's been hiding offshore accounts he didn't disclose during his arrest. Ethan's lips curled into a smile. Perfect. That afternoon, the headlines flipped. Logan Pierce, caught in new scandal. Hidden offshore accounts revealed. The story broke faster than Logan could react. Within hours, prosecutors announced new charges, and Logan's lawyer dropped him. Ethan sat back in his chair satisfied. But just as he was about to celebrate, Marcus burst into the office. We have a problem, Marcus said. Ethan frowned. What now? Logan's out. Ethan froze. What do you mean he's out? His lawyer cut a deal, house arrest while awaiting trial. Ethan's pulse quickened. Logan wasn't just desperate anymore. He was free, and that made him dangerous. Lila found out about Logan's release the same way everyone else did, through the news. Her hands trembled as she switched off the TV. He'd find her. She knew it. She grabbed her phone and called Ethan. Hello? Logan's out, she said, her voice shaking. I know, Ethan replied. I'm already on it. What does that mean? It means you're staying with me until this is over. Lila hesitated. Ethan, it's not up for debate, he said. Pack your things, I'll send Marcus to get you. And just like that, the walls began closing in. That night, Lila sat in Ethan's penthouse, staring out at the city lights. Why are you doing this? She asked. Ethan looked up from his laptop. Doing what? Helping me, protecting me. Ethan's eyes softened, but only for a moment. Because whether I like it or not, I still care. Lila's breath caught. Ethan, don't, he cut her off. Not yet. Because as much as Ethan wanted to believe they could fix this, Logan was still out there, and he wasn't done. Not by a long shot. And that's where we'll pause for now. If you're loving this story so far, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. The next part is where everything explodes, and you won't want to miss it. Ethan paced the length of his penthouse, his thoughts churning like a storm. Lila sat on the edge of the couch, knees pulled up to her chest, staring at her phone as if it might explode at any moment. Logan was out. And despite the ankle monitor and the court's restrictions, Ethan knew better than to underestimate him. He's coming for me, Lila whispered, breaking the silence. Ethan stopped mid-step, turning to face her. He won't get near you. Her eyes darted up, searching his face for reassurance. You don't know that. I do. Ethan's voice was firm, but there was an edge to it, like a man trying to convince himself as much as her. Lila didn't look convinced. What if he doesn't care about the consequences anymore? He's already lost everything. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then I'll make sure he doesn't have the chance to try. Before she could ask what that meant, Marcus burst through the door, his phone pressed to his ear. We've got a problem, Marcus said, hanging up and locking the door behind him. What now? Ethan demanded. Marcus held up his phone. Logan's disappeared. Lila shot to her feet. What do you mean, disappeared? His monitor's been disabled. He cut it off an hour ago, and no one's seen him since. Ethan's blood ran cold. You told me this wouldn't happen. Marcus shook his head. I didn't think it could. The security was tight, but he must have planned this. Lila's breathing quickened. What do we do now? Ethan crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders. You let me handle this. How? She asked, her voice trembling. Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Marcus. I want eyes on every one of Logan's known contacts. Track his car, his phone, anything. Marcus nodded. Already on it. As he disappeared down the hall, Ethan turned back to Lila. You're not leaving this apartment, he said. But no arguments. His voice left no room for debate. I'll keep you safe, I promise. Lila swallowed hard, but nodded. Okay. Hours passed, and tension thickened like fog. Marcus checked in with updates. None of them good. Logan had vanished, leaving no trail. Lila sat at the dining table, staring at the front door as if expecting it to burst open. Ethan sat beside her, a gun resting within reach on the table. Finally, Marcus called. We found him, he said, his voice urgent. Ethan stood. Where? A hotel downtown, room 412. He's using an alias, but it's him. Ethan grabbed his jacket. Stay here, he ordered Lila. No, she said, standing. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Ethan, this isn't up for discussion, he snapped. You're staying here. Lila opened her mouth to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. Be careful, she whispered. Ethan nodded and walked out the door. The hotel was dimly lit, the kind of place people went when they wanted to disappear. Marcus was already waiting in the lobby. He's on the 4th floor, Marcus said, handing Ethan a keycard. Room's under surveillance. He hasn't left since he checked in. Ethan took the key. Stay close. The elevator ride was suffocating. Every muscle in Ethan's body was coiled, ready for what might come next. When he reached the door to room 412, he paused, taking a breath before sliding the keycard through the lock. The door clicked open. Inside, Logan was sitting on the bed, a half-empty bottle of whiskey in one hand and a gun on the nightstand. Well, Logan said, his voice slurred but sharp. Look who decided to pay me a visit. Ethan stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. You made a mistake coming back here, Logan. Logan laughed bitterly. Mistake no, Ethan. The mistake was trusting you, letting you play me like a fool. Ethan's eyes narrowed. You did that all by yourself. Logan stood, swaying slightly. You think you're untouchable, don't you? That you can just destroy people and walk away clean. Ethan didn't flinch. I didn't destroy you, Logan. You did that. Logan's eyes darkened. You're wrong. You think this is over, but it's not. He reached for the gun, but Ethan was faster. Don't, Ethan warned, pulling his own weapon. Logan froze, his eyes flickering between the gun and Ethan's face. You won't shoot me, Logan said, trying to sound confident. Ethan's grip tightened. Try me. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, Logan's shoulders slumped. He dropped back onto the bed, laughing bitterly. What's so funny? Ethan demanded. This, Logan said, gesturing around the room. Look at us two men who had everything, reduced to this. You did this to yourself, Ethan said coldly. Logan's laughter died. Maybe, but so did you. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? You think you won? Logan leaned forward. You think taking me down fixed anything? Ethan's jaw clenched. It fixed enough, Logan smirked. We'll see. Before Ethan could respond, Marcus burst through the door, gun drawn. Cops are on their way, Marcus said. We need to move. Ethan nodded, backing toward the door. You're done, Logan. This time, there's no coming back. But as Ethan left the room, Logan's laughter followed him. Cold, sharp, and filled with something that made Ethan's blood run cold. Back at the penthouse, Lila was pacing when Ethan returned. Did you find him? She asked. Ethan nodded. It's over. But the look on his face told her otherwise. Are you sure? Ethan hesitated. I don't know. Lila reached for his hand. We'll figure it out together. Ethan looked at her, the weight of everything they'd been through hanging in the air. Maybe, he said. But deep down, he knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. And that's where we'll pause. The final confrontation is just around the corner, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. The next part is where it all comes crashing down, so stay tuned. Ethan stood by the window, his silhouette outlined by the city lights. The glass in his hand trembled slightly, something he hadn't allowed himself to show in years. Lila sat on the couch, clutching a throw pillow like it might protect her from the storm closing in around them. He's not done, Ethan said quietly, more to himself than to her. Lila's voice cracked. You said it was over. Ethan turned, his eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. Logan's not the type to go quietly. He's desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. Lila flinched. She wanted to believe Ethan could handle this, but Logan's escape had shaken them both. What if he comes here? She whispered. He won't, Ethan said, his voice firm but hollow. You don't know that, she shot back. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. No, I don't, but I'm ready if he does. Lila stood and crossed the room. You can't keep doing this, waiting for him to make a move. You need to end it. Ethan's eyes locked onto hers. I will. And the way he said it sent chills down her spine. The next morning, Marcus called with an update that only made things worse. Logan's gone underground, Marcus said. No credit card activity, no phone pings, nothing. Ethan clenched his jaw. And his contacts? Radio silence. Ethan paced the office. He's planning something he wouldn't disappear without a reason. Marcus hesitated. There's more. Ethan stopped. What? He's been asking around about Lila digging into her job, her routine. Ethan's blood ran cold. He's targeting her. It looks that way. Ethan slammed his fist against the desk. Find him. Marcus didn't argue. We're on it. Hours later, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. You think you've won. Think again. Ethan's heart hammered as he stared at the message. Another buzz. Unknown number. She'll never be safe. Ethan grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Lila's voice stopped him. Where are you going? To end this. She stepped in front of him. Not without me. Lila. No, she snapped, surprising him. You keep trying to protect me, but I'm not running anymore. Not from him, not from this. Ethan hesitated, but the fire in her eyes was undeniable. Fine, he said, but stay close. They found Logan at an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. Marcus had tracked his burner phone signal, and Ethan wasted no time. As they approached the building, Marcus handed Ethan a second gun. Just in case, Marcus said. Ethan glanced at Lila. Stay behind me. She nodded, but her hands trembled. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit and eerily quiet. The sound of their footsteps echoed against the concrete walls. Logan! Ethan's voice rang out. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Logan's voice came from the shadows. Took you long enough. Ethan turned toward the sound, gun raised. Show yourself. Logan stepped into the light, looking disheveled but dangerous. You've been busy, Logan said, his voice dripping with venom. Framing me, destroying everything I built. You did that yourself, Ethan shot back. Logan's eyes flickered to Lila. And you? Stay away from her, Ethan growled, stepping between them. Logan smirked. Protecting her now. Funny you didn't seem to care when she was in my bed. Lila's face paled, but she didn't flinch. Don't do this, Logan, she said softly. You don't have to make it worse. Oh, I think we're past that, Logan snapped. He reached into his jacket, and Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. Don't, Ethan barked. But Logan pulled out a phone, not a gun. He held it up, showing a video feed. Lila's apartment. This isn't over, Logan said. Not until I say it is. Ethan lunged, knocking the phone out of Logan's hand. The device shattered on the concrete floor, and in the chaos, Logan swung at him. Ethan dodged, but Logan grabbed a metal pipe and came at him again. The two men grappled, their struggle echoing through the warehouse. Lila screamed as Logan pinned Ethan against the wall, raising the pipe to strike. But before he could, Lila grabbed a broken piece of wood and swung it at Logan's head. He stumbled, giving Ethan just enough time to shove him to the ground. Marcus burst in with his team, guns drawn. "Freeze!" Logan froze, his chest heaving. "It's over," Ethan said, stepping back. Logan's eyes burned with rage, but he didn't move as the officers cuffed him. Outside, Lila leaned against the car, her hands still shaking. "You okay?" Ethan asked, stepping closer. She nodded, but her voice wavered. "Is it really over this time?" Ethan looked back at the warehouse as Logan was loaded into a police car. "Yes," he said. "It's over." But as he wrapped his arm around her, he couldn't shake the feeling that some scars don't heal. And that's where we'll leave it for now. If you've been on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. The final part is coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Ethan sat in the interrogation room, his knuckles still raw from the fight with Logan. The air was stale, and the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, adding to the tension in the room. Across from him, Detective Harris flipped through a thick folder, occasionally glancing up like a predator sizing up its prey. "So," Harris said, leaning back in his chair. "Self-defense, huh?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "You've seen the footage he attacked me first." Harris raised an eyebrow. "And you just happened to track him down in a deserted warehouse?" Ethan didn't flinch. "I wasn't going to wait for him to show up at my front door." The detective smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You always this proactive, or is it just when your ex-wife's involved?" Ethan's patience thinned. "Are you charging me with something, detective, or are we done here?" Harris's eyes lingered for a moment before he closed the folder. "For now, we're done." Ethan stood, his shoulders squared, but before he could leave, Harris spoke again. "One more thing, Kane." Ethan paused, his hand on the door. "Guys like Logan, they don't give up. If I were you, I wouldn't get too comfortable." Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he walked out, his mind already racing. Back at the penthouse, Lila was waiting by the window, her arms wrapped around herself, as if trying to hold her nerves together. When the door opened, she spun around. "What happened? Did they arrest you?" "No," Ethan said, setting his keys down. "But Harris isn't convinced this is over." Lila's face fell. "I don't understand. Logan's in custody." "For now," Ethan interrupted, "but he's already slipped through the cracks once we can't let our guard down." Lila sat on the couch, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't keep living like this." Ethan sat beside her, his hand brushing against hers. "You won't have to." She looked up at him, tears threatening to spill. "What if he gets out again?" "He won't," Ethan promised. "Not this time." But even as he said it, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered, "Are you sure?" 2 days later, Marcus burst into Ethan's office. "You're not going to like this," Marcus said, tossing a folder onto the desk. Ethan opened it, and his blood ran cold. Surveillance photos of Lila. At the grocery store, leaving her new job, walking through the park. "Where did these come from?" Ethan demanded. Marcus hesitated. "Logan had them stashed in a locker at the bus station. We think he was planning something before we caught him." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "What else?" Marcus sighed. "There's more." He handed Ethan another folder, this one filled with emails and letters, threats, plans, and worst of all, evidence that Logan had been working with someone inside the system. "He had help getting out," Marcus said. "Someone's pulling strings for him." Ethan's chest tightened. "Who?" "We don't know yet," Marcus admitted, "but we're looking." Ethan stood, grabbing his jacket. "Where are you going?" Marcus asked. "To make sure Lila's safe." Ethan found Lila at her office, sitting at her desk with papers scattered everywhere. She looked up when he entered, and her face immediately fell. "What now?" she asked. "You need to come with me," Ethan said. "Why, what happened?" "Logan had someone helping him." Lila froze. "What does that mean?" "It means this isn't over," Ethan said, and until we figure out who's behind it, you're not safe here. Lila stood, panic flashing across her face. Where can we go? Somewhere no one will find us. Ethan drove them out of the city, winding through back roads until they reached a secluded cabin tucked away in the woods. Lila stepped inside, her eyes scanning the rustic interior. This is where we're hiding? For now, Ethan said, locking the door behind them. Lila sat on the couch, her hands shaking. I thought this was over. I thought we could finally breathe. Ethan knelt in front of her, taking her hands. We will, but I need you to trust me. Lila's eyes searched his. I do. And for the first time in months, Ethan felt the weight of those words. That night, Ethan sat by the fire, his gun resting on the table beside him. Lila curled up on the couch, her breathing finally steady. But Ethan didn't sleep. His phone buzzed, and when he checked it, his stomach dropped. Unknown. Number. You can't hide forever. Ethan's grip tightened around the phone. Logan might be in custody, but someone else was out there. Someone who wasn't finished. Morning came too quickly, and Lila woke to find Ethan still sitting by the fire, dark circles under his eyes. You didn't sleep, she said softly. I couldn't. She sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. You can't protect me if you're running on empty. I don't have a choice, Ethan said. Yes, you do, Lila whispered. You don't have to do this alone. Ethan turned to her, and for the first time, he let the walls crack. I'm scared, he admitted. Not for me, for you. Lila cupped his face, her eyes steady. Then let's stop being scared and start fighting back. And just like that, something shifted. This wasn't just Ethan's battle anymore. It was theirs. And that's where we'll pause for now. If you're loving the story so far, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. The final part is coming, and trust me, it's going to be explosive. The fire crackled in the corner of the cabin, but the warmth it gave off didn't reach Ethan. He stood near the window, his eyes scanning the woods outside. Lila sat on the couch, her knees pulled up, staring at the flickering flames. Neither of them had spoken much since arriving, but the silence wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. Finally, Lila broke it. Do you think it's him? Ethan turned, his jaw tight. It doesn't matter who it is, I'm not letting anyone near you. But it does matter, she insisted, standing. Because if it's not Logan, then someone else is out there, someone just as dangerous. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. She wasn't wrong, but he wasn't ready to admit it. Not yet. Lila stepped closer. Lila, what if this doesn't end? What if there's always someone else pulling the strings? It ends, Ethan said, his voice low. One way or another, it ends. But the look in his eyes said something different. Later that night, Ethan's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You're running out of time. He gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. Lila saw the look on his face and stood. What is it? Nothing. Ethan lied, but she saw through it. Don't shut me out, she pleaded. Not now. Ethan hesitated before handing her the phone. She read the message and looked up, fear clouding her eyes. What do we do? She asked. Ethan's voice hardened. We finish this. The next morning, Marcus called with an update that changed everything. I found the leak, Marcus said. It's someone inside Logan's legal team, his paralegal, Jenna Rourke. Ethan's stomach dropped. She's the one feeding him information? Worse, Marcus said. She's been covering for him, moving his money, setting up fake identities. And get this, she's his girlfriend. Ethan's hand clenched around the phone. Where is she now? Gone, Marcus replied. Left town 2 nights ago, but we're tracking her. Ethan hung up and turned to Lila. It wasn't just Logan he had help. Lila's face paled. And now she's out there? Ethan nodded. Which means we don't have much time. They packed their bags and left the cabin that afternoon. Ethan knew staying in one place made them an easy target. But as they drove back toward the city, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them. Ethan, she said, glancing in the rearview mirror. What? There's a car behind us. Ethan looked, his stomach tightening. A black SUV had been following them for miles, keeping its distance, but never falling too far back. Hold on, Ethan said, his grip tightening on the wheel. He took a sharp turn onto a back road, the SUV following. Lila's breathing quickened. What do we do? We lose them, Ethan said. The road twisted and turned, but the SUV stayed close. Suddenly, it sped up, closing the distance. Ethan! Lila shouted. Ethan slammed the brakes, sending the SUV swerving to avoid a collision. It skidded to a stop behind them, and before Ethan could react, two men jumped out. Stay in the car, Ethan ordered as he grabbed his gun and stepped out. The men didn't hesitate. One of them pulled a knife, while the other circled to the side. This doesn't have to end badly, Ethan said, keeping his gun raised. But they didn't listen. The man with the knife lunged, and Ethan fired. The shot hit the ground near his feet, making him stumble back. The second man charged, and Ethan swung the gun, knocking him to the ground. Lila screamed as the first man grabbed her, pulling her out of the car. Let her go! Ethan roared. But the man only tightened his grip, pressing the knife to her throat. Drop it! The man shouted. Or she dies. Ethan froze, his finger hovering over the trigger. Lila's eyes locked on his, pleading silently. For a moment, time stood still. Then, a gunshot rang out. The man holding Lila collapsed, blood spreading across his shoulder. Marcus appeared from behind the trees, his gun still raised. Get her in the car! Marcus yelled. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lila and pulled her to safety, while Marcus kept the second man at bay. They sped off, leaving the attackers behind. Back at the penthouse, Lila sat on the couch, trembling. Ethan knelt in front of her, brushing her hair out of her face. You're safe now. But she shook her head. No, I'm not until this is over. Ethan looked at Marcus. Tell me you have something. Marcus nodded. Jenna's holed up at a safe house downtown. We've got the address. Ethan stood, his eyes cold. Then let's finish this. The safe house was a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. Ethan, Marcus, and two officers moved in silently, weapons drawn. Inside, Jenna was packing a bag, her hands shaking. Don't move, Ethan ordered, stepping into the room. Jenna spun around, her eyes wild. You don't understand. Oh, I understand, Ethan said. You helped Logan destroy lives, and now it's your turn. Jenna backed against the wall. I didn't have a choice, he made me. Ethan didn't buy it. You had every choice. Tears streamed down her face. Please, save it, Marcus said, cuffing her. You're done. As the officers led her out, Ethan felt the weight lift, just a little. But he knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Back at the penthouse, Ethan and Lila stood by the window, watching the city lights. It's really over this time, Lila said softly. Ethan wrapped an arm around her. Almost. She looked up at him. What now? Ethan's eyes darkened. Now, we rebuild. And for the first time in a long time, they both believed it might actually be possible. And that's where we'll pause for now. If you've enjoyed this story so far, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. The final chapter is coming, and you won't want to miss the explosive conclusion. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft glow over the city skyline. Ethan stood by the penthouse window, his reflection barely visible in the glass. For the first time in weeks, the weight on his chest felt lighter, but it wasn't gone. Not completely. Behind him, Lila stirred, her footsteps soft as she joined him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his back. It's really over this time, isn't it? She asked, her voice quiet. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. It is, he finally said, and this time, he almost believed it. Logan's arrest had been swift and final. With Jenna in custody, the evidence against him piled up faster than his lawyers could keep up. Money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy charges ensured he wouldn't see freedom anytime soon, and Ethan made sure of it. Marcus had worked overtime to secure Logan's offshore accounts and freeze every dollar tied to his schemes. By the time the dust settled, Logan was broke, powerless, and utterly defeated. Lila's name had been cleared too. Ethan's legal team released statements proving her lack of involvement, and the media quickly shifted focus to Logan's downfall. But no matter how many headlines changed, the scars didn't fade overnight. 1 week later, Ethan and Lila visited the shelter she had once worked at, the place where she'd tried to rebuild her life after everything fell apart. It looked different now, brighter, fuller. The women inside no longer wore the same haunted expressions that Lila remembered from her early days there. Tess, the shelter coordinator, greeted them with a warm smile. "It's good to see you both," Tess said. Lila smiled back, but it was nervous. She hadn't stepped foot inside since the chaos began, and part of her still felt out of place. Ethan noticed. "You belong here," he said softly, squeezing her hand. Lila took a breath and nodded. As Tess led them through the rooms, Lila listened to the stories of the women they helped, stories of survival, hope, and second chances. By the end of the tour, something shifted in her. "I want to come back," Lila said. Tess blinked. "Come back?" "To work," Lila clarified. "To help. I can't keep running from everything that happened. I need to do something that matters." Ethan didn't say anything at first, but the pride in his eyes was unmistakable. "Then do it," he said. "I'll back you 100%. And just like that, Lila found her purpose again. That night, Ethan and Marcus shared one last drink in the penthouse. "You did it," Marcus said, raising his glass. Ethan shook his head. "We did it," Marcus smirked. "So what now, back to business?" Ethan leaned back, his eyes scanning the city lights. "Not yet. I think I've earned a break." Marcus laughed. "You take a break?" But Ethan wasn't joking. For the first time in years, the idea of slowing down didn't terrify him. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't fighting to hold on to something. He was building something new. A month later, Lila stood in the shelter's office, surrounded by boxes and papers. It was chaotic, but in the best way. She'd officially taken over as director of outreach, and the work was overwhelming, but it gave her life meaning again. Ethan stopped by that afternoon, leaning in the doorway as he watched her organize files. "You look good here," he said. Lila turned and smiled. "I feel good here." Ethan stepped closer, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "So, where does this leave us?" Her smile softened. "I guess that depends on whether you're ready to forgive me." Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he cupped her face and kissed her. Slowly, deeply, like he was erasing the past and writing something new. When he pulled away, he rested his forehead against hers. "Not forgive," he said, "but maybe start over." Lila's eyes shimmered, and she nodded. "I can live with that." Meanwhile, Logan sat in his prison cell, staring at the cracked concrete walls. His reflection in the tiny mirror was almost unrecognizable, hollowed out, defeated. He'd tried to fight back, but Ethan had been 2 steps ahead the entire time. And now he was nothing. The final blow had come when Jenna turned on him to secure a lighter sentence, betrayed by the one person he thought he could trust. Logan let out a bitter laugh. It was funny. Really. In the end, the people he'd underestimated, Ethan and Lila, were the ones who won. And he had no one to blame but himself. Back at the penthouse, Ethan packed the last of his boxes. He decided to sell the place. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. As he loaded the last box into the moving truck, Marcus leaned against the doorframe. "You sure about this?" Marcus asked. Ethan nodded. "It's time." Marcus extended his hand. "Well, wherever you go next, don't forget who's got your back." Ethan shook his hand firmly. "Always." And with that, he drove away, leaving the past behind. 1 year later, Lila stood on stage at a charity gala, addressing a crowd of donors and supporters. "We've helped over 300 women rebuild their lives this year," Lila said, her voice strong and steady. "And we're just getting started." Ethan watched from the audience, his heart swelling with pride. After the speech, Lila found him by the bar. "Did I do okay?" she asked nervously. "You were incredible," Ethan said, pulling her in for a kiss. And for the first time, everything felt right. So there you have it, the end of Ethan and Lila's story. From betrayal and heartbreak to redemption and second chances, this has been a wild ride. But what do you think? Did Ethan make the right choice by giving Lila another chance, or should he have walked away for good? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you love this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. There's plenty more drama, twists, and stories coming your way, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.